South China Morning Post, 29th of November 2023, China and India are vying to become the leaders of developing countries, courting the Global South. A rift in the world is caused by China's desire to lead the Global South as part of its need to be a worldwide power. India has become a formidable rival to China in the developing world, thanks to its year as the G20 presidency. New Delhi will hold its second virtual Voice of the Global South conference in November. The opening statement of the most recent meeting, which served as a briefing to participants on the Group of 20 summit hosted by New Delhi in September, was delivered by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. "We are more than 100 countries, but our priorities are similar. The Global South has always existed from a geographic standpoint, but it has never had a voice before," he remarked. China, a member of the G20, was not invited to the virtual summits, which were interpreted by many as an intensification of India's efforts to woo the Global South. This term roughly refers to developing nations in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. According to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the phrase, which was coined by U.S. political activist Carl Oglesby in 1969, has been trendy in recent years as a convenient shorthand for nations seeking to topple the current structures of the global economy in favor of a more multipolar framework. Although China and India have taken distinct approaches, the former emphasizing investments and infrastructure, analysts noted that both nations saw the Global South as becoming increasingly crucial to gaining power and influencing the evolving global order. According to Ali Wying, senior analyst with Eurasia Group's Global Macro Geopolitics practice, the main point of India's pitch to poor nations is that it will work to make well-known international institutions more inclusive and receptive to their perspectives. Apart from conducting virtual summits, the Indian External Affairs Ministry states that New Delhi has taken advantage of its G20 chairmanship to ensure that the concerns of the Global South receive due cognizance. The 55-member African Union, AU, was formally admitted to membership of the G20 at the September summit in New Delhi, providing an additional impetus to India's efforts. China and India endorsed the AU's candidacy, but Modi gave a hearty hug and smiled to AU Chairman Azali Assoumani upon his arrival at the G20. Xi Jinping, the president of China, did not attend the function. According to Modi, the entry of the African Union would strengthen the G20 and also strengthen the voice of the Global South. Wying claims that India was also successful in preventing the G20 from being sidetracked from its priorities, including improving pandemic preparation and lowering the world's debt. This was due to the Russian war in Ukraine. India launched several measures during the G20 that allowed it to position itself as a serious contender to China for leadership of the Global South, according to Byron Chong, a research associate at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore. One of the projects is a reformation and lending capacity expansion plan for multilateral development banks, which supports the interests of developing nations. While this would facilitate financial access, Chong noted in a September piece for the school's Center on Asia and Globalization that it might also be interpreted as an attempt to weaken China's influence and status as the key source of developmental loans and aid for poorer nations. In collaboration with the US, EU, and a few Gulf and European states, India unveiled an extensive rail and maritime project connecting it to Europe via the Middle East. Chong refers to this as the most overt indication of India's intention to compete with China. Since its inception 10 years ago, China's historic Belt and Road Initiative has primarily benefited developing nations, especially in areas like Africa and Central Asia. Xi reaffirmed his support for the growth of emerging economies during the Third Belt and Road Forum in October, emphasizing that China's modernization was for all developing countries. Senior research fellow Amy Tendu-Pallet of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore stated that China has been able to mobilize some strategic influence through its infrastructure building efforts. Instead, India has concentrated on putting the issues of the Global South before the most significant and most potent policy forums on the planet. It has tried to ensure that some problems facing the Global South, such as tackling climate change, are acknowledged and addressed. Pallet stated that as governments seek to create alliances with like-minded states, the significance of the Global South's support for China and India has increased. China and India are eager to change the global system. The Global South is crucial to them in this way. The transmission of global public goods became an important source of obtaining strategic influence as a result of the changes in the world order brought about by the COVID-19 epidemic, according to Pallet, which also made the Global South more influential. Chinese state news agency Xinhua said that China has sent more than 1.8 billion vaccination doses to more than 120 nations and international organizations during the pandemic's peak in December 2021. According to Indian media, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan were among the nations to get approximately 235 million doses from India. In August, during only his second abroad trip of the year, Xi attended the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, demonstrating China's interest in developing nations. According to Xi, the emerging economies bloc comprising South Africa, Brazil, Russia, India, and China was a crucial forum that would raise the solidarity and cooperation of developing countries to a higher level. Observers noted that the BRICS leaders' decision to extend invitations to Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates to join the group reflected China's increasing sway. According to Alessandro Arduino, an affiliate lecturer at the Lao China Institute at King's College London, the expansion is consistent with China's deep engagement in the Global South during a seismic shift in the international governance landscape. Beijing's pursuit of leadership positions in the Global South is an essential part of its strategy to create a world with multiple power centers and increase its influence in international affairs, the speaker stated. China aims to reshape major power dynamics by prioritizing development and positioning itself as the champion of developing states in its pursuit of global dominance. According to Wying of the Eurasia Group, China feels that increasing its influence in the developing world is crucial to counteracting the increasing effort to subdue it from advanced industrial democracies, particularly the US. According to Wying, India believes its actions will enable it to advance from being an Indo-Pacific power to a global one. According to him, the rivalry between China and India to win over the Global South would intensify in the face of the two countries' deteriorating relationship, which has been characterized by violent incidents along their shared Himalayan border in recent years. Wying predicts that India would look into new avenues to have representatives from poor nations attend high-profile events. For example, officials from Southeast Asian countries could be invited as guests to Quad meetings. He said, China will keep using its geo-economic statecraft to gain ground but with a focus on greener, more sustainable investments. According to Pallet, he anticipates that both nations will continue to interact with developing countries, with competition extending to the areas of environmental cooperation, people-to-people connectivity, and infrastructure development. More infrastructure projects headed by India are probably going to join the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, which was launched at the G20, according to Pallet. China is already increasing its financial assistance to African nations, particularly by financing the construction of conference centers, sports stadiums, and legislative structures around the continent. Additionally, Beijing has given the African Union a $200 million headquarters and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's $80 million base in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Analysts concurred that China and India's rivalry would only get stronger. Still, they also pointed out that, given their disparate requirements and significant differences, it might not be feasible for one leader to speak for the whole Global South. Zach Cooper, a senior scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, a think tank located in Washington, states that although the BRICS countries have similar interests in general, they don't seem to agree on comprehensive regulations about trade, technology, and other exchanges. He stated, "The fundamental differences among the BRICS Plus members are the core problem, which will limit its ability to deliver results. It doesn't seem like countries have a unified perspective. They are unable to express a shared future vision." According to Pallet, developing nations' responses to China and India's attempts to portray themselves as defenders of the Global South have been conflicting because these nations are not all the same and have different interests. He proposed that other major middle-sized and regional powers, like South Africa, Brazil, and Russia, would also want to be the leaders of nations in the Global South. However, Pallet added that it was challenging to imagine a single leader who could guide the Global South due to the variations among emerging nations and the changing nature of the international scene. According to Wine, it would be foolish for any nation to claim it is the representative of the developing world. Moreover, in the face of systemic instability in the global order, it is unlikely that developing nations would want to rely exclusively on China, India, or any other nation.